So, welcome back to another episode of Living the Sky Life. My guest today is Pam Blanton with Partners for Housing. If you guys listened to the episode that aired a week or two ago with Betsy Hicks Russ, she talked a lot about Partners for Housing, and she is who introduced me to Partners for Housing and Pam. So, I'm really grateful for that new relationship. So, welcome to the podcast, Pam.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you. I know we got a chance to talk the other night on a personal basis, just about our future with Skylar and housing and all of those things. So I thought that was perfect timing, really, because what I would like to do is kind of walk the listeners through what to expect kind of with the Partners for Housing process, and if they were to reach out to you for assistance. And since I've been through it, I can kind of chime in about my experience too. But before we get into all of that, I failed to ask you the other night when we were talking how your love of helping special needs families kind of came to be. You've been in this career a really long time, and you have to be passionate about it to do this. It's hard work and it's emotional work, I'm sure. So how did this come to be for you?
Yes. Well, I started working with the Housing Finance Program in Seattle. And at the time, we were a funder for affordable housing projects. So nonprofit developers would apply to us for funding to create long-term affordable housing. And our director at the time wanted one person to specialize in each service system, because when they fund housing projects, they have to know that the projects will have the support they need to be viable for a 40-year period. So they wanted somebody to specialize in senior housing, veterans housing, and housing for people with developmental disabilities. And when they asked that, I raised my hand quickly for people working with developmental disabilities, because I have a very dear friend who has twin girls with developmental disabilities. And we always were wondering, where are Lily and Annie going to live?
Mm-hmm.
And so I raised my hand, and it became very easy from my experience to start seeing little changes that could be made that would help families access housing for their loved one with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I saw an opportunity, I would run over to the director of the Developmental Disabilities Division and say, hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? It's very small. And ultimately, she said, why don't you come work for us? And they created a housing coordinator position. And I took the position, and I started working as housing coordinator for the Developmental Disabilities Division. And at the time, our local housing authority was starting this really innovative new Section 8 program for people with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I dove right in and learned all about how Section 8 can help families afford housing. And in a 5-year period, we moved 450 people out of their family home onto Section 8 and learned a lot about what is possible. And, once you start working with
Mm-hmm.
families who have kids with disabilities, it's such an inspiring group of families. And it grabbed my heart. And so there I've been.
Well, we need people like you who are invested in it too. I mean, it always seems like when I'm talking to parents from all over the country and out of the country, really, they're the ones that are generating these or building these homes or building these communities and trying to like create day programs and all the resources that we know we need, because nobody outside of this life seems to really want to help us because it doesn't affect them directly. So they're like, how badly do they really need these things? So I'm always just like beyond excited when I meet someone like you who doesn't directly have, children on the spectrum or any other disability, but that it's close enough with having such a close friend who probably could share some insight with you along the way too of what her girls needed and, as far as housing goes and programming goes. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's such meaningful work. I
Hmm.
mean, it's very meaningful, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to do it. I also noticed along the way, there's so many different siloed social service programs,
Hmm.
and most people don't know how to navigate across them. And I was in a unique position as housing coordinator to work across multiple systems, and they do interact with each other, yet the people in their silo don't always know how to tell families how to do that.
Yep.
So, um,
Yes, it is very siloed and it's very confusing as I learned. I mean, I learned so much from you the other night, so I'm really anxious to get into that. Because there's just you don't know what you don't know. And the worst part of it is I don't always know who to ask. I didn't realize I didn't know a lot of these things. But then once I kind of get a little, Birdie tells me a little bit of like Betsy's told me all kinds of things. I'm like, well, how do I find that? And who is an advocate in my community to like hold my hand through this process? So how long have
and
you
it
been?
matters a
Yeah,
lot what question you ask and
yeah,
who you ask
and how
and
you
the
ask
answer
it.
you get. And a lot of people answer questions without really knowing the answer, which
Hmm.
can really lead families astray.
Hmm. Yeah, for years. And then we kind of miss out on some things because we either age out of that program or don't know about something that we can't get on yet. So that's where we need all this advice. So how long have you been with Partners for Housing then?
So I started Partners for Housing in 2010.
Okay.
I've been more than 30 years working in housing and services for people with disabilities. Started Partners for Housing in 2010 with the idea of creating a Match.com
Yeah.
type program where families could find compatible roommates and other families that share vision and values so they could work together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I started in 2010, primarily me. I've had part-time people working with me over the years, a little bit here and there. And but just primarily consulting with families.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love the website and there's so much out there, but one of the statements on the website is that, along the mission of Partners for Housing is empowering your vision of a home or of home for people. And I think that's one of the first things that a lot of parents mention, and like myself, the thought of your adult child living elsewhere is frightening. I mean, that's just one word to describe it, but just the idea of moving your child out of your immediate care and into another facility, it's frightening, but it's just, there's so much you don't know. And I love that you guys have everything outlined on the website about the different types of homes, the questionnaires you fill out, that like you said, the roommate matches and all of that. So um I guess, can you start the listeners with what they would do first working with you guys? I just said I've gone through the process, so I know it's very easy. It's very thorough. I was surprised at how lengthy the questionnaire is, but I was glad that it wasn't one page. You ask a lot of tough questions on there, which has to be asked because that's the only way to really match people and get the right housing option for a family. So what is the first step that people need to take if they're interested in working with you guys?
Yeah, so the first step is our benefits and housing review. This is the online questionnaire. It is a lot of questions, and we ask a lot of questions because, you know, first of all, it's helpful for families to know what questions to ask, and it
Hmm.
gets them thinking. Um, but the questionnaire looks at a lot of things. When we started, the questionnaire was designed to be a matching tool to find compatible roommates, right? So what are those kind of questions? Once we started selling it and people started completing it, we realized how many people didn't have all the benefits that they were entitled to. So we tweaked the assessment many times over the years, and now we're looking at what benefits do you have, what benefits do you need, What is your vision of housing? And so that questionnaire, once families complete it, we can do a review and have a really good consultation with families afterwards, because all the big questions are answered.
Mhm.
And so we want to start with helping families get all the benefits that they're eligible for, and learn about things like Section 8, which is really hard to understand and get information about, so that they can dream big in their housing vision. And the idea is, to help families create a unique housing solution that meets the needs of their loved one. And it's because the families that I had met and was working with, they wanted other options besides a vacant bedroom in a group home, right?
Mhm.
They had real ideas of what they wanted. They wanted choice and control, choice of roommates and housing location and caregivers, and they wanted control over what went on in that particular home, which a lot of times in a group home setting, they don't get those options.
Mhm. So do you help families find, I know there are various types of housing arrangements. So you mentioned group home. I know that there's different names for different things and depending on the state you live in, but also like assisted living facilities, which is also a non-roommate choice, like you just are placed in a bed that's free. Um, do you guys help with that, or is it predominantly like shared housing where a family finds a home or an apartment or something and they kind of coordinate with another family to have roommates and things like that? Is that predominantly what you guys are focused on?
So we start with telling families about the options that are available.
Okay.
And sometimes in the state of Washington, there are two options, basically. An adult family home, which is where there's 6 people living in a home, owned and operated by a caregiver. It's licensed by the state. That's one option. Anybody with Medicaid is entitled to live in that kind of a home. The challenge with that model is that it is a model that was designed for seniors, and they try to use that model for younger adults with disabilities, which isn't always appropriate for a 23-year-old to live with a 90-year-old. There are different stages of life,
Mm-hmm.
but there are some great adult family homes, and sometimes that's the best option for families. So we
Mm-hmm.
talk about that. We talk about how do you find them, and what they look out, how they cost. And there's another option in our state called supported living.
Mm-hmm.
This is really for people with the highest support needs, requires a higher level of waiver than most people have. And it's not an entitlement, meaning that people are added to that program as funding allows. And it's typically, like I said, people with the highest level of need or families that are really in crisis. In that model, the state contracts with an agency to provide 24/7 support to a home, and the agency's hiring the caregivers, and so those are the two options. And what we found were there were so many families that said, hey, neither of those models work for us.
Mm-hmm.
We know what we want, and if we could partner with other families, we could have enough services to create something unique for our loved one, and sort of provide that oversight ourselves. And so that's where we focus. That's another set of services called shared living development. But there are a lot of people that do our benefits and housing review that don't go into shared living development. So shared living is really a family-driven model.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of sort of a state provided solution.
And that's where the families find the caregivers on their own. They deal with the funding, however they're going to charge rent or whatever they're going to do. And I would guess in some cases that they choose not to have roommates for their loved one. They just have them with the caregiver, and that's it. in
Yeah,
some.
so
Yeah.
some families, yep, sometimes there's roommates, sometimes not. So
Hmm.
to date, we've helped families create 57 shared living homes serving
Wow.
135 people. Those homes all have a live-in caregiver and sometimes two. So you might have one person with two live-in caregivers, somebody who has really high needs.
Hmm.
You might have three people, roommates, living together that all go off to work every day and just need somebody to make sure they have healthy meals and take their jacket with them when it's cold. So just less oversight. And there are people who come to us, find compatible roommates in our roommate matching pool, and maybe their loved one doesn't need a live-in caregiver. Maybe they just need some support to come in 3 days a week to help with some things like cooking, cleaning, shopping, some of those activities of daily living. And they wouldn't go through our shared living process because they can just get together with another family, rent an apartment, and then together work to provide that support.
Hmm.
But when people need a live-in caregiver, it gets a lot more complicated, and that's when they appreciate our services to help them through that.
And how long does that process continue? Is it, once the shared home is developed, the roommate matches are done, and the families, everyone's happy, and it's all set up. Is there like a frequent check-in period with Partners for Housing and the families, or is it just kind of when they feel like they have questions and they need something that they reach back out? Is it a long-term relationship?
Yeah, so our shared living development process typically takes about a year.
Hmm.
So we have caregiver agreements, we help with household budgets, we help with the Section 8 process, we help with landlord negotiations, we have a parent commitment agreement, all of these things. Once everybody moves in together, then we offer a 6-month facilitated review process. So over a 6-month period, we have 3 facilitated reviews where we talk to the caregiver, find out what's going well, what are the challenges, how's communication. We talk to the parents. We often talk to the roommates. Then we have a meeting with everybody together to talk about um, steps we can take to get the home off to a good launch.
Hmm.
After that third facilitated review, we're out, and it's the caregiver that's managing the day-to-day, and the parents are providing the oversight. Now, as things change over time, because they always do, one roommate might move out and they might come back and say, hey, we want to look for another roommate, or we need help onboarding another family. They might have a caregiver and caregivers also turn over. And
Hmm.
so when a new caregiver comes in, families might want some help onboarding that caregiver and another facilitated review process. So families can come back to us at any time,
Hmm.
and we offer consulting services to help them through that next phase as it changes.
That's fantastic. Gosh, I mean, just the things you listed from the beginning are so invaluable. Like, just the contracts and then just kind of understanding everybody's role and working on rental agreements and things like that. It's one thing to buy a house and, I have great intentions and I buy this house and that Sky's going to live in and I find a caregiver and all of that. But there's so many things like that you covered with us the other night just about the Section 8 and about SNAP. It's SNAP in our state, but like food stamps or food benefits by the state and things that I wouldn't even know how to begin the process of, but Skylar's entitled to. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about. And I admitted this on our call that I was guilty of, well, I can afford his food and I buy his groceries every week. So I don't want to put his name on any of the lists for, state financial assistance and things because I can provide for that, but I'm not going to be here forever. So how is he going to get, the means for groceries and food if I'm not here? So he deserves to be on all of those lists and all of those programs, right?
Absolutely. And there's a lot of families that feel that same way.
Hmm.
And we just try to explain that, you're trying to set up a long-term solution that's financially viable. And to do that, you bring in all the resources that you can. And then some families are still private paying some, if, depending on where they want their loved one to live, what are their lifestyle preferences and expectations. And so sometimes families private pay as well.
Mhm.
And you have to be careful about how you do that as well, because you can't private pay for a Medicaid funded service. So we have to just be really careful about what you private pay so you don't jeopardize state services or SSI or the benefits that people have.
Yeah.
So,
And that's where your expertise would definitely be helpful, because I'm sure people make mistakes just innocently all the time with stuff like that. I know that one of the things that's, just really important to me is that any caregiver that works with Skylar is compensated well. So if they're not paid very well by their state hourly rate, I always want to give them more. And they're like, you can't really do that. I mean, like, that's their respite pay, that's their rate. So I try to find other ways to like take care of them, but you just don't want to risk losing really good people and really good staff because they're not valued at an agency that they work for, to be caregivers.
and you know what? That's how you recruit and retain good people,
Hmm.
right? Is you pay them a livable wage. In our live-in caregivers, most of our live-in caregivers are making about $4,500 a month. That's
That's awesome.
tax-free for a
Yeah.
live-in caregiver. They get all their housing related costs. They often get a cell phone stipend. Sometimes they get a food stipend. All of these things that the families put together to make it a really good package so they can attract and retain good people.
And is
And
that,
you can get that either by sometimes private paying
uh-huh.
extra, but also by, sharing those costs with other families. Just like all of our kids, when they move out of the house, whether they have disabilities or not, most of them have roommates when they
Hmm.
start out, right?
Yeah.
To share the costs. And that really helps make things affordable.
Yeah, for sure. I guess that was something that I wondered, is if in order to have those benefits and to have a livable wage for a caregiver, is that completely out of pocket for families, or is there other resources that people probably don't know about through their states, waivers or different things that'll pay for that? I think you had mentioned like Section 8, just with all the details about Section 8, and there's a lot that can sometimes help cover some of those costs for the caregiver, their rent and
Yeah. If a person has a Section 8 housing choice voucher, they can request reasonable accommodation for a living caregiver, and the
Mhm.
housing authority will pay the rent of the caregiver. So there you have housing related costs that become part of the compensation package for the caregiver. And it's not coming from the families,
Mhm.
it's coming from the housing authority. So yeah,
Yeah.
those pieces are really important.
Yes, and good to know. Well, I know you guys are based in Washington State, and that these services with Partners for Housing are free for residents that live in Washington State, but that you also service families out of state, like mine. In filling out the form and doing all of the things, there's a $500 fee for it. But I mean, I can already tell you, I've already said it, what, 3 times now, that I've already seen the benefit of the $500 that I paid to learn. I couldn't write fast enough with all the things that you were telling me, and then you sent me anyway. So how does the service work for families like mine that are out of state?
Okay, so yes, our benefits and housing review is $500.
Mhm.
We were very fortunate to get a grant from the Dan Thompson Memorial Grant, a huge grant to help us, to allow us to provide our benefits and housing review free to almost 6,000 families in Washington State.
That's so
So it's
nice.
funded by a grant, and that piece. Our shared living development services is another, and our consulting services are separate from that. And all of our prices are on our website. But yes, families from other states can purchase it for $500, and we can talk about the benefits in the state of Washington for a limited time until June of 2025. These reviews will be free for families in Washington State.
Mm-hmm. And then, so do you guys research, because we haven't gotten to that phase for us yet, do you research like the state, like their section, well, I guess Section 8 and all that stuff is federal, so it's pretty much the same everywhere, but are there certain things that you guys look into for the family that's, reaching out to you from a different state, or is the family kind of directed to some places to research on their own, the
Yeah,
type of
so the
housing
tricky
available and
part,
stuff?
yeah, the tricky part is that services are funded by Medicaid, and every state has their own Medicaid program. So really exploring the support service side it's different in every state. And then, like you said, there's the federal benefits, which is going to be SSI and other Social Security programs, Section 8. Food benefits, SNAP benefits are similar in every state. But when you're talking about navigating the support service system, the developmental disability system in your state, it's different. So what we're trying to do is find partners in states that have that expertise around Medicaid services in that state, and find a person that we can refer people to in that state for that. As we move to other states, which we're doing, that's what we do. We look for a partner first, but we're helping a lot of people where we're not really deep in the state yet. We can still help them with the benefits and housing review, think about all the services, and then we do spend more time on those out-of-state ones prior to the consultation to kind of look around. And like I said, every state's different, but there's similarities, so we're able to find those places. ARCs are great places to help find that. Other states have different programs that really specialize in that Medicaid funding piece. So it is tricky, just like it's tricky if you live in one state and want to move to another state. Accessing services, it just doesn't follow the person, right? When you get to the new state, you have to apply for those support services in that state. Some states have wait lists that are 10 years long. Some states don't have wait lists at all. Sometimes it takes a year, but it's tricky because of that. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's going to be similar in any state as far as like the wait list and what you want to do. So would you advise people who are getting to the place of discussing like alternative living arrangements for their loved one, and kind of reviewing the different types, the adult family homes, the supportive living, whatever they're called in the state that they live in, and the shared housing, to start kind of looking around for other shared homes that are already in existence, or maybe if they have the means, like buying a house or converting their home into a tiny house, like a mother's suite or something. I guess for a lot of people, maybe who don't have a lot of financial resources to go and buy a separate house, what is it that they can do like today? If their child is 17, I think Betsy even recommended like 17, you should really start kind of making some decisions and get on some lists, even if you're not ready, even if their name comes up on, like a roommate list or a paired list and you're just not ready yet, you can have them skip you. But I think that's where people are very frustrated and uncertain of what to do, is what do I do today?
So a good place to start is to find out what is available in your state. And so if you have services and a case manager, finding out from them, what are the housing options, what's available. And then if you can look at some of them. Now you can't look at, if you a lot of people come to me and say, hey, we want to look at some shared homes. Well, these are private homes, like your home and my home.
Just like a realtor. You can't just
it's not
walk
a
in.
facility, right, that you can just pop into, unless somebody happens to be looking for another roommate and they're in that mode. But for adult family homes, in Washington state, also called a group home in other states.
Mhm.
That's the other tricky part, is different states use different languages,
Right.
different words. But in our state, if in Washington, if somebody was going to start exploring housing, I would say ask your case manager for some referrals to some adult family homes. Those are facilities, and if they have vacancies, they're looking for roommates, and go look at them. And don't be disappointed or give up if you see something that, like, oh my gosh, that would never work for us, because every home can look different depending on the caregiver who's running it and the people who are living there.
Mhm.
So I say, look at as many of those as you can, because you learn a lot about what you want when you see what you don't want. So sort of getting a feel for what's available is a good first step. And then, but always be dreaming about, what is your dream vision? What dream big. What do you see? And do you have the um, ability to sort of take the lead in creating that? Now, not every family has that, right? A lot of times, just the time and the space, it's, not everybody can do that. But if you do, you can dream big and start thinking about what it is that you want near your family, in communities of your choice, living with people who are share interests with your loved one, right?
Mhm.
All of those things that that you envision as your ideal housing solution. And then, you know, also think about what's good enough for now, right? Because things evolve over time,
Mhm.
and where they move now doesn't necessarily mean that's where they're going to live forever. I tell you, I have a lot of families that say, we just want to get this set up and be done and have our place and our solution. But, how many of us live in the same home that we lived in when we first moved away from our parents, with the same roommates? Things evolve over time. So, um, you know, dreaming big, and then thinking about what's good enough for now, because you can always improve on that or change it over time.
Mhm. I think it's important too, as we have kind of connected with people in our own communities with children similar ages as ours, to talk to other parents who have kids the same age as yours, and what they're thinking and what they're planning. They may have the exact same idea as you, but they're not sure how they're going to do it. And if the kids, are similar in, nature, or, if they're somebody who isn't noise averse and then somebody who's noisy, maybe that wouldn't work. But, if you could see them potentially being roommates, just have more discussions with other parents too. And maybe you'll end up finding your perfect scenario with the families working together and can set
And
something up.
a lot of families aren't talking about housing because it's a very scary thing.
Yeah, it's a
And it's
tough.
a very big thought. And so when you're sitting around at a Special Olympics game, regardless of the age of your family member, we're not talking about housing. So we're talking about work and what we did this weekend, but starting to bring that up, because if you see that your um, adult child has a good connection with other people on their teams or in school, and you also have a connection with the parents,
Hmm.
then there is the beginning. Because I would just say that oftentimes it's easier to find compatible roommates than it is to find families that really share vision and value. And so if you see that in both, just starting to talk about, you know, about that. But it really is hard for a lot of families to even get their head around that.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then what happens is, when they're in school, right, you're thinking about the transition program, then you're thinking about work or day programs, or what is life going to look like. But you're not really thinking about housing yet, and it's hard to bring that in.
Hmm. Yeah, I've said many times on many episodes that it's taken me until the last year or so to really come to grips with, I'm not doing this to him. I'm doing this for him. I was always I'm never, never, ever going to place him anywhere, but we all can't live forever. And I think it would be a huge disservice to Skylar for me to continue thinking that way into my 70s and 80s and hit him in his 40s. And, then what? Then what? I think it'd be easier, just like with anything. I think it's easier to transition him at a younger age, mid-20s or whatever, than it would be when he's in his 40s. My daughter went to college. She's figuring it out. He deserves a chance to kind of meet other peers and figure it out and see how he does on
And
his own
there's
without
so
mama.
much, yeah, and there's so much growth that happens.
Mhm.
It's amazing that I hear that time and time again. When there is so much growth that happens when somebody moves out of their family home. Our kids with disabilities, our kids without disabilities.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And there's so much peace for parents to see that, rather than waiting for this and having a crisis come in and then having to do something suddenly. Families think about sleeping at night. They sleep better at night when they know their loved one is going to be safe if they're not here, right?
Yeah, to take care of them. I'm sure
Mhm.
you have plenty of success stories, but are there any that just sit on your heart all the time about maybe parents who came to you and said, I don't really know that I want to do this, but I think it's necessary, and that have seen amazing success? I just can't tell you the number of parents whose children are in group homes or shared living homes, and when they come home for a visit or a weekend or something to their family home, they are like on eggshells wanting to get back to their house and with their friends and their life, and the parents are like, oh my gosh, I never expected that they would be this anxious to get away from me and get back to their life. So have you seen things like that throughout your time doing this with families?
A young woman who was completely nonverbal, and her mom was a single mom, and she worked full time, and she was in day programs, and she had a full life at home, but she was really worried about that move. But she had a friend that they had known each other and gone to school with each other through school, and the parents knew each other. And so they decided they were going to try to set up something with the ladies together. And they did. And the mom, was, when we were doing our facilitated reviews, when I'd say, how's it going? She kept saying, I just don't know. She seems mad at me, and she's not saying anything. She just seems mad. And I don't know, because she's nonverbal. Well, then at about, I don't know, I'd say about the 4-month point, she called me and she said, oh my gosh, I had her home this weekend. And when it got to be 5 o'clock and the time to go back, she was standing by the door. And as we got near the house, she started getting really excited. And, her face was full of a smile. So yes, she's happy, right? She was completely happy. So you have that. And then you have the ones that are saying, Mom, no, I don't want to come home this weekend. I got plans with my friends, right? We're going here and there and doing this and that. And so,
Yeah, that
a
makes
lot
it
of things.
worth it. I mean, not
Yeah.
every case is going to be just, peachy keen like that, but I think that's the other big takeaway that I've gotten over the last year or so, is that um in placing him now while he's young and I'm still able to kind of be controlling like I am and monitor everything that's going on, and actually hire the caregiver and be really close contact with the families and all of that stuff. If something is not going well and it's just not working out, then I can take him out and we'll regroup and we'll figure out something else. But like you said, a lot of times we unfortunately wait until an emergency placement is necessary and they don't get a say and they just get whatever bed's available. And it's a frightening experience, I gotta believe, for the child and for the family. And it's just disruptive. It's just not easing them in. I would hope that I could ease Skylar into it, like take him to the house and let him see it, and then have him help me try to pick out his stuff for his room and gradually discuss this with him before the actual move comes. I would think that that's a huge benefit of doing it earlier than later.
Yeah, and a lot of families, transition happens in a lot of different ways, right?
Mhm.
Some people, it's better to just move in all at once. A lot
Mhm.
of people will go over a couple of times for dinner, maybe have a weekend sleepover, do it a little bit at a time, and until they get comfortable. And then what I often see is, the young person with a disability is all in, and the parents are still kind of holding on a little tight
Guilty,
because
probably.
because it's hard to kind of let go too, right? And
Mhm.
see when they're ready. A lot of parents, though, do see one other little heartwarming story. Young woman in a wheelchair, high support needs. She actually has 2 living caregivers, nonverbal, and has a lot of support needs. Very sweet woman. Her mom was over one day, and Margaret wheeled her chair over to the table, and she took the keys off the table, and she rolled over to her mom and put them in her mom's purse. And her mom knew that that was her sign that she was ready for her mom to go. So those things you start to see. Um,
Oh,
and she called me right away. The mom called me right away and said, I think I should be sad, but I'm not. It makes me feel so happy that she was telling me to leave, so uh,
oh, that is
yeah,
just, yeah. I mean, it's emotional no matter
right,
how you look at it,
right.
but there
And
is
another
so much
thing to think
benefit.
about is, we often think of placements for people, like when you're thinking about a vacant bedroom or a group,
Mhm.
some group home. But when we think about shared living, it's not a placement. It is families creating a home for their loved one, right?
Mhm.
So, it's different because you're building it around them in a house that meets their needs, in a community where they know their neighbors,
Mhm.
with support around them, and roommates that they know, right? Because in a shared living home, if families are going on our matching site to find roommates, then we really encourage them to spend a year getting to know each other, right? Do things together, do activities together so they can know each other. And then, there's a lot less you can be lonely and isolated in a group home, right? But if you have compatible roommates that are your friends, you don't have that feeling of excuse me, loneliness
Mhm.
and isolation.
I think that's one of the most genius parts about Partners for Housing is that roommate page. And getting to take a look at that the other night. I mean, it's got photos, it's got everything that they like and dislike. I mean, it's really like Match.com almost. But I love that the parents are in communication with each other, and and that you recommend that people talk for a long period of time. It takes that long probably to get the shared housing up and running anyway, and the funding and the caregivers and all the pieces in place. So that gives them ample time to spend time with each other. And I mean, that's how my neurotypical daughter does her college roommate situation and whatever. I mean, she's not going to just be in a room with someone she doesn't like, or pay rent in a house where she doesn't like any of the people or get along with anybody. So I mean, it's really no different. It's really no different. I think the more that we treat our children that are disabled, that they're not disabled when it comes to things like this and decisions like this, it's easier for all of us to accept it and, just
Yeah.
make it easier on all of us. So,
So our roommate pool is something that people can access after they do the benefits and housing review.
mhm,
And then we have our consult. Once they submit it, we schedule a consultation. After the consultation, we look to make sure that it's a good fit for our pool. So most people are invited into our pool, but sometimes another type of housing solution might be better for that family.
mhm,
But once we invite people in, then there's some questions from the benefits and housing review that pull into a profile, and that an initial questionnaire is kept between us. It's the profile that families share. They can edit it however they see fit. They can upload a photo. It really focuses on needs, or I'm sorry, on interests. So friendships are based on shared interests. So there's a lot about interests and activities, geographical area. There's a few questions about level of support need. But, families are matching based on shared interest, not disability, right?
Mhm.
So, so the pool, so included in that $500 for the benefits and housing review is the questionnaire, and the questions themselves can be really helpful.
Mhm.
The follow-up consultation, the review of benefits, and then access to our roommate matching pool. And so once you're in our pool, you can search by, so we're not matching people, we're
Just giving the.
providing a platform where
Mhm.
families can look through profiles and search by geographical area, gender, interest, number of different things. And then you can go through and browse through profiles. You can like the ones you can mark them as favorites, then you can reach out to the other family as well. And then after families get a group of people together, if they need a living caregiver and they want help supporting the shared living home, then they can come back to us, and we offer the services to help them set up that home.
Do you have some people make connections, like just friendships? They don't end up maybe being the best pairing for roommates, but they have shared interests and they like being in the community together. Because another thing I hear a ton, and I feel too, I just want Skylar to have a friend. I just want him to
Yeah.
have one friend that's a peer that enjoys watching Elmo all day like he does, or whatever it is. And it's so hard to find. So if I'm going through all these profiles and I'm like, oh my gosh, this young man would be such a good friend to Skylar, I think. And we could, have play dates or get together as families and just have more
Yeah,
community
and
support.
families reach out to other families, they get to know them. They might
Mhm.
be in different timelines because timing is a big thing.
Right.
And maybe the guys are really good friends, but maybe there's enough difference in the families that they're not sure that would be a good long-term match. But yeah, friendships are created there as well.
That's awesome. I mean, that's just worth it in itself. Just to play matchmaker for your kids to have friends. Oh
Yeah.
goodness. Well, I'm so elated that Betsy introduced me to Partners for Housing, and everything that I've gotten from Partners for Housing for our own family so far has just been fantastic. So I highly recommend anyone that's thinking about this whole process of housing, and your child is never too young really to start. I would still say, like with Betsy, like 16, 17, 18, just start thinking about these things. You don't have to do anything, but just start giving it some consideration because it'll creep up on you. The fact that Skylar's going to be 21 very soon is just mind blowing to me. I swear I just did a podcast when he was 16, and I'm like talking about, man, when he hits his 20s, I don't know what I'm going to do. And we're already there. So
Yeah, and families who do that our questionnaire like 17 and a half is a great time just to start thinking about the benefits that they could be eligible for as an adult, because
mhm.
systems change from the child to the adult system. And getting, even if you're not thinking about housing moving out until they're in their mid-20s, but starting at that, starting early is good to get the benefits they're eligible for, maximize those benefits so that when you're ready to move out, then you have everything you need.
And just learning about them. There's still
Mhm.
things I'm learning about. And in our case, I've been very candid that we're going to probably move. So I'm looking at a couple different states, and you've got several states listed out there aside from Washington with the roommate pool and different resources and information out there. I think it's what, like 7 or 8 states that you have
Yeah,
listed.
so right now we are in Washington, Arizona, New York, Georgia, Indiana, we
Yeah.
have one.
Yay.
Connecticut, New Jersey. Our pools are not big in those other states
Right.
yet, which is why we are always looking for funding, like we got in Washington State, so that we can provide initial services for free to build up our pool. And then, it's easier to attract other people into the pool once you have a big pool.
Mhm.
But so yeah, so we're growing. We're looking at that
Awesome.
opportunity.
Well, I appreciate the information so much. I'm sure a lot of listeners learned a lot of information from you. I will link up the Partners for Housing website. Is there anything else that you want to leave people with? Any advice or suggestions? You've already given a ton, but aside from starting early.
Starting early and dreaming big, and
Hmm.
nothing's impossible, but you have to be able to dream it to do it. So dream big. And you don't have to just picture that one vacant bedroom in a state-run program. Dream big. And
Yeah.
yeah, and imagine a life of them being independent from you, and how much joy you will get to in seeing them thrive in their independence, and you thriving too in your life as a parent of an adult, right?
Hmm. Yeah. And I think I guess a last comment would be, this is something that I've already started talking to Skylar about in various ways. I've just kind of inched this into the conversation. Like when we took my daughter to college and I was talking to him about, I'd love to know someday if you want to move in with some roommates or things. Even though he's nonverbal, I mean, he can spell eventually back to me what his interests are and hopes are. So I think that's been helpful, so that when this day comes, it's not being sprung on him. We've talked about him moving out and not living with us forever, and it's not a punishment in any way, and nor are we giving up on him. That was my biggest fear. I don't ever want him to feel like we gave him away or we gave up, because that's the furthest from the truth. I'm trying to give him more of a life of his own and detach myself from him. I'm cutting the cord with myself because I'm a lot. So,
And there's some certain times when it's really easy to put it in the conversation, like your sister's moving out, and someday you're going to move out and live with roommates too. And
mhm,
starting to just have the conversation early, like, someday when you move out, what would you like? One young woman, all she wanted was a red couch. So start talking about her red couch someday when she moves out. Or when you get new dishes, maybe you put the other ones in the garage and you say, someday when you move out, these can be yours. So just having those
mhm,
simple conversations whenever you can to bring them in, because it is difficult if you never talk about it. I have had parents too where, they can only talk about it when their loved one is not around, because
mhm,
it causes so much anxiety. It's sometimes, if you just make it part of the natural conversation of adulthood,
mhm.
it makes that easier.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Pam.
All
It's
right.
been
Thank you for having
wonderful.
me.
Of course. And I look forward to our continued conversations about wherever the heck I end up,
Yes,
whatever
me
state
too.
it is. Well, thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
All right. Thank you.